This is a Best in Climate episode of Earth Feels, where each week your hosts Rose and Christine read to you from some of the best climate-related blogs and articles on the web.
Hello, it's Rose here with this week's Best in Climate. And I'm here in the U.S. with COVID-19 cases raging. It occurs to me that we're all musing about the lessons that we can hopefully learn from this pandemic. Economies are forever changed and jobs are lost. There's no going back to what we thought was, quote, normal. So the question in my mind really is, where do we go from here? So this week, on Tuesday, August 4th, The Guardian printed a letter from more than 100 leading global economists, calling for a phasing out of fossil fuels as a key to rebuilding our economy. And that's what I'd like to read for you now. It's entitled Letter from Economists: To Rebuild Our World, We Must End the Carbon Economy. And like I said, there's 100 different economists that signed this letter, and I will include a link on earthfeelspodcast.com, not only to the letter itself, but an addendum so you can see the people that read it and see if any of them are on your hit list. The carbon economy amplifies racial, social, and economic inequities, creating a system that is fundamentally incompatible with a stable future. From deep-rooted racism to the COVID-19 pandemic, from extreme inequality to ecological collapse, our world is facing dire and deeply interconnected emergencies. But as much as the present moment painfully underscores the weakness of our economic system, it also gives us the rare opportunity to reimagine it. As we seek to rebuild our world, we can and must end the carbon economy. Even as climate breakdown looms around the corner, the pressure to return to the old carbon-based economy is real, and all the more dangerous given the fundamental instability of an economy rooted in injustice. Sources of large-scale suffering, such as crop failure, water shortages, rising tides, wildfires, severe weather, forced migration, and pandemics go hand in hand with a warming world. For example, exposure to airborne pollution heightens the risk of complications from diseases like COVID-19, and deforestation and rising temperatures make the emergence of future infectious diseases more likely. When these consequences manifest, it is no accident that they are disproportionately felt by the communities of color, low-income communities, the most vulnerable nations and peoples, and other historically marginalized groups. It is Black people in America, for instance, who bear some of the highest rates of exposure to polluted air. The carbon economy amplifies and begets racial, social, and economic inequities, creating a system that is fundamentally incompatible with a stable future. If we fail to act now, the present moment may merely be a preview of what is to come, as we are forced into ever more painful situations and trade-offs. It is naive, moreover, to imagine that we can simply nudge the fossil fuel industry, an industry that has lied about climate change for decades, actively opposed serious climate solutions, and continues to plan for fossil fuel-dependent future into good behavior. Instead, we should recognize that the present moment creates an opportunity to bring about a better future for ourselves and our children. By taking on the carbon economy, we can begin charting a pathway towards economic recovery while building a fairer, more sustainable world in the process. First, governments must actively phase out the fossil fuel industry. Bailouts and subsidies to big oil, gas, and coal companies only further delay the essential energy transition, distorting markets while locking us into a future we cannot afford. Instead, a coordinated phase-out of exploration for and extraction of carbon resources allows governments to redeploy funds towards green technology, infrastructure, social programs, and good jobs, spurring an economic transition that benefits people and the planet. Second, institutions of financial power must end their fossil fuel investments and funding. When our largest banks, most influential investors, and most prestigious universities place bets on the success of the fossil fuel industry, they provide it with the economic and social capital necessary to maintain the dangerous status quo. Instead, these institutions should divest from fossil fuel companies and end financing of their continued operations while reinvesting those resources into a just and stable future. Third, people must build political power to advocate for a fairer economic system. If we attempt an economic rebuilding whose guiding principle is a return to, quote, business as usual, end quote, we will simply substitute one crisis for another. Instead, we must recognize that when crises strike, the disaster amplifies along society's fault lines, and that when we don't prepare for disasters, the costs of inaction fall most heavily on the most vulnerable. A green recovery can and must uplift those who need it most, at home and around the world, creating a more resilient and regenerative society in the process. By achieving a large-scale economic transformation that dismantles the carbon economy and brings about a greener world, we have an opportunity to begin the process of economic recovery while working to undo the injustices at the heart of our modern system. As the undersigned experts in economics, we call on all our policymakers to recognize the role that meaningful climate action has to play in rebuilding our world, to recognize that a healthy economy and society require a healthy planet. This letter has been signed by more than 100 economists. I'll provide the link on earthfieldspodcast.com. So there you have it. 100 of the leading economists worldwide who see what's happening, who see the opportunity for a new world, and ask us to be smart enough to have the foresight to grasp this opportunity, to look beyond the challenges of COVID and see it as an opportunity. We'd love to know your thoughts on moving forward. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time. That's this week's episode of Earth Feels. Special thanks to singer-songwriter Kristen Hoffman for generously allowing us to use Song for the Ocean. Thanks for listening.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode. Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Children of the earth, I'm calling out. There's a mission for you and for